I want to take a few moments to talk about animal systems. So those of you who have had anatomy and physiology currently in there, you are at a huge advantage to this. Humans have 11 body systems, whereas some of the animals we're going to talk about here in the coming weeks may not have those. They maybe have a 3 or 4, or ones that they have that are similar to ours aren't as complex. They're more simplified. So I want to do a quick run through of some of these systems. So there is a PowerPoint, but there's also a set of guided notes that you should be filling in. So the first one is digestion. So it's one thing to go and get food. That's what heterotrophs do, but we got to make it into something that is usable. You know, single-celled organisms, or like in our case for animals, sponges, they have to digest their food intracellularly. That means inside of the cells themselves. Everything that's more complex than that's from the Filoporifera can digest their food in a digestive cavity and not necessarily in each individual cell. So keep in mind that we have enzymes. Whenever you hear enzymes, think about things that speed up reactions. So we have naturally occurring enzymes that help speed up this process. If we didn't have those enzymes, it would take us days to digest one meal, and we don't have time to sit around and wait on that. Another thing about having a full complex digestive system is we can prey on other things that are larger than our own cells, because if we were unicellular, we wouldn't have that ability. So there are two types of digestive cavities. The first one is called a gastrovascular. This is going to be our more simplified organisms. They have one opening. So wherever your food goes in, your excretion goes out. Thank goodness we are not like that, right? There's no cell specialization. The mouth is the anus. We have a gut, or what we call a digestive tract. Two openings. Food enters the mouth, excretion leaves the anus. It's a one-way track. We have specialization. We have a certain area, like our mouth, where we're used for, breaking things down, putting the saliva in there, putting the enzymes in there. We have just things that are more of like a passageway. We have things that are used for peristalsis, which is a fancy way to say movement. We have an area that, collects, carbs, lipids, proteins. And then, of course, an area of our digestive tract for the excretion of solid waste. The second system you need to know about is your respiratory system. So respiratory, you need to think about the exchange of gases. So some animals is something very simple, like, jellyfish using diffusion. More complex animals have more complex structures. Like our aquatic organisms, they have gills. They have lots of blood vessels there that help with this process. Terrestrial animals, of course, have lungs. Some animals, they use respiration through their skin, so that moisture on the skin transfers the gases. There are two types of circulatory systems we mentioned several weeks ago. That's that opened and the closed circulatory system. Keep in mind, closed is what we want. That's the more advancement, and we definitely have that. Your nervous system, which would be used for the conduction of nerve impulses. You need to think about words like the nerve net and ganglia there. Ganglia isn't as complex as a brain, but there are some animals that kind of have like this in between. You need to think of support. Some organisms have something what we call a hydrostatic skeleton. Hydro means water, so it's water that's contained under pressure in a closed cavity, like our hydra, like an earthworm. Some organisms have what we call an exoskeleton versus the endoskeleton. So you need to think of mollusk. You need to think of arthropods. And then, for endoskeletons, you need to think of us. We have bones on the inside that help give us that structure. You need to think of the urinary system. Sometimes when the word excretory system is used, is solid and liquid waste. But typically in most animals, we put digestion and solid waste together. And then we have a system called the urinary system. But if waste is left in our body, whether it's solid or liquid, that's toxic, that's poison. We got to remove that. Us, we have, not only our anus, but we have our bladder, we have we have our urinary system that helps us get rid of things like that, like our kidneys. Moving on, reproduction. Make sure you keep in mind asexual versus sexual. Think about some things called like fragmentation. This is when an animal grows a new animal from a piece, like where it's been removed, like when we talked about porphyria. Think about aphids. Think about how insects reproduce sometimes through parthenogenesis. And then when you think about sexual reproduction, think about hermaphrodites. Think about the difference between external sexual reproduction and internal. Some organisms that are in water, they just have to release their egg, release their sperm, and they release a lot of it and hope it comes in contact with one another. Well, that's not how humans reproduce. We reproduce internal sexual reproduction. So think about the difference between those. So as you go through the PowerPoint, make sure you are filling in those blanks. So in your table of contents,